Good morning. Thank you for coming by. What I'd like to do is make sure that we keep this as informal as possible. If you have questions during the presentation, just raise your hand. If I don't see you, or if I'm looking down or something, just say, hey Glenn, I've got a question or comment, and let me know. So again, I appreciate you coming by. I'll be asking for some comments during the presentation. Feel free to speak up. I think everyone will benefit from any ideas or comments that you have or questions during the program. I am saving a little time at the end for questions and discussion about what we're doing. I'd like to begin by introducing you to Drew. We hired Drew about 4 or 5 years ago. We hired him because he took videos. He has a degree in video production. He was doing independent documentaries, but he wanted to work full-time at Duke. We ended up hiring him full-time. But when we hired him, he was a guy with a video camera. We bought him a camera. He took videos for educational purposes, marketing, communications. He does good work. We have a YouTube page, Duke School of Nursing, and all of his videos are shown here. He's done all of these, produced them, or in some way produced them. And you can see they're good work. Now, if you want to look at them now, just make sure you turn down the volume. But take some time to look at his work because it really is good. When people started seeing his work, our faculty and our communications and marketing department, the demand for his services increased. He was on my team, and I started getting questions. How do I even request a video? I saw Drew in the hall. I asked him if I could have a video. He said, sure. What's the next step? I don't know what to do. Drew said he was going to do a project for me. Where is he in the project? I don't know where he is. I don't see him in the hall. I need to know if it's going to be finished in time. What is he working on anyway? He's always busy. He's taking pictures, he's doing videos, but who's it for? And is it important? Okay, I need my video quickly. Drew said he'll try to get to it and get it done by the time I need it, but I need to know, is that going to happen? What happened is, we had a guy that he had a video camera, to a guy that was really doing a critical service for the School of Nursing at Duke. And we had to turn it into that. So the solution was, we had to do two things. Number one, we had to create video as an official IT service in our group. So I direct the IT services at the School of Nursing, and that includes service desk, application development, distance education support, classroom AV support, and now this new service, video production. The second thing we need to do was figure out how to do metrics for a video service. So what I want to talk to you today about is the process that I have gone through to create metrics package for our School of Nursing IT. It not only includes video production, which we did for Drew, but it includes service desk and application development. I learned a lot while I did this, and it kind of boils down to understanding where to get the information and then what to do. I want to go over some definitions that you need to be familiar with when you're working with metrics. IDLE, how many of you are familiar with IDLE? It's pretty standard, IT infrastructure library. They do a lot of work with metrics and about service providing. ITSM, IT service management, is the same way. I won't mention those today in the program, but understand that they influenced a lot of what we've done. Critical success factor, that's an official term, but business objective is an easier way for me to look at it, so I use the term business objective. It's the same thing. It's a piece of business that needs to be done by IT. A metric is a quantifiable measure of support. And I want to tell you, it's not just a number. There's a lot behind that we're going to go over today. Measurement is just an individual instance of a metric. KPI, key performance indicator. I'm not using that term today. I use metric as a synonym. Now, some of you guys that are really into idle may catch me on that and say, well, it's not exactly a metric. But in terms of this presentation, let's keep it that way. Maybe we can talk after the presentation about the difference. Any questions about these? These are terms that you need to be familiar with when you're creating metrics. What I want to do is go over the steps that I went through to create our metrics package. And sometimes you see this as a dashboard. I just call it a metrics package because it contains much more than just a dashboard of numbers and dials and things. This is the process that we went through. We engaged the business, find out what metrics we have available, establish a reporting platform, tell a story. This is if you don't remember anything I say, remember this. Your metrics have to tell a story. What I mean by that is, if I print the metrics, I put it down on the dean's desk or my boss's desk, I want them to be able to see the story that I'm trying to tell. I want to see exactly where we are, where we're going, and where we've been. All this improves the user experience. So let's get started. Roll up our sleeves and engage the business. And I will tell you, in my opinion, this is the most important part of a metrics package. Can anyone tell me why? Why would you think this is important?
Because if you don't know how the business runs and what you're supposed to do, you can't measure it.
Exactly. Any other things?
Define what they really want.
Right. That's really critical. I'll show you an example of that a little later. Anything else? Look at marketing, or look at metrics as marketing your organization. This is a way for you to tell the business how well you're doing and to tell them what you're doing, because a lot of times they don't know. And of course, communication. There are three audiences you need to be concerned about three audiences I was concerned about with creating our metrics. Myself and my team. What did I want to know? What did the team want to know? And what did I want them to know? Those are three different things. I won't spend a lot of time on that because I assume that, how many of you manage a team of IT folks here? I assume you already have your metrics for that. You already tell your team what you're doing and what you want them to do. Your executive team, and that includes your supervisor. This is the big one. What does your boss want to know? But also, what do you want your boss to know? What do you want to tell him in these metrics that you need him to know? Finally, users and other stakeholders. I support faculty, students, and staff. Are you guys all supporting the same, or do you have others that you support? Okay, so it's about the same. When I started at the School of Nursing, I started an ITAC. It's an IT Advisory Council. We didn't have a meeting with our users, so I said, I'm going to start one, and I started in June of the year I started. I spent a month. I wrote Oracle stored procedures. I got all this data together. I could tell them 2 years ago how many email tickets Scott Neal had resolved. I had every piece of information that they could possibly ask about. In my first ITAC meeting, I put up this chart. It took me a week to prepare. Showed them everything on here. We took 30 minutes to talk about this chart. I was pleased. After the meeting, I went downstairs. Yeah, this is right. I did the right thing. A day later, one of the faculty came and stopped me and said, you know, Glenn, I don't care about that stuff. I don't care how many email tickets you had. I don't care what priority it was. It took 2 weeks for you guys to fix my printer, and every time I walked by the service desk, they were watching a movie. So your charts didn't tell me anything that was helpful for me. But I want to know why it took 2 weeks to fix my printer. Now, has that ever happened to anybody? Maybe not that serious, but have you ever seen that? I was given the business a lot of metrics, and a lot of metrics that I really thought were good. I like this. I'm a numbers guy, but they didn't care. What I needed to do was get to them and find out what they needed. So what I did was do some homework. I thought about the mission. The mission of my group was to make sure that Duke School of Nursing students had the best educational experience they could. Now, that sounds like a very narrow, focused thing, but what it means is I've got to make sure that students have a good experience. The faculty who teach those students has a good experience. Then the staff that support the faculty also have a good experience. So I had to look at three different ways of looking at what we were doing. We all know what services we provide. I'm sure we could all take 5 minutes and list all the services: email, classroom support, distance education support. What I had to do was put those in order. What was critical to supporting our mission? What was more important, email or making sure that student in Montana can get to a lecture that they needed to look at? Our students, by the way, we've done surveys. Most of our students work full-time, so they study in the evenings. So if they can't get to their lectures, if they can't get to their course materials, they have to wait a whole nother day before they can see it. So that's our critical service. After putting those in order, I had to figure out how we measure those services and how we measure quality. It doesn't matter if it comes in with an email ticket or a phone ticket. It's the service that matters. How to report that. If I have a student say, I couldn't get to my lecture Thursday night, well, that's an interesting piece of information. It's something I need to know. But it's not going to help me when I'm trying to make metrics. I need some figures that I can report on so that we can see progress and status. And that's another thing. We've got to show progress. It doesn't help to get a snapshot. Well, it helps to get a snapshot sometimes, but that snapshot needs to be translated into what does it look like long term, what did it look like before, and where are we headed. And then the conversation. Part of the conversation is meeting with that faculty member who said he didn't get his printer fixed in 2 weeks and finding out exactly what he's interested in. Turns out he doesn't print anything that he needs for school. He was just printing stuff he was a tech geek. He loved tech. And he was printing out, whatever, articles in a magazine or whatever. But printing was important to our students. So really, we had to change the conversation about printing. We have a service at Duke called ePrint. Students print free, and we manage the printers and the resources. So that was one of our key services. We had to make sure that printing was good. An executive. What kind of information does an executive need to know about the IT staff? Let's say your boss. What kind of information does he want to know? Productivity, that's the biggie. Anything else? Financials. Mine is just like that. Cost, productivity. That's what they want to know, and that's what we got to show. Professor. Besides being able to print, what do they want to know? Exactly. And for distance education, what do they need to know? Exactly. That's a good one, the classroom, because what we decided as a result of this was we have one emergency and only one emergency, and that's when a professor is in front of the class we drop everything and go fix it. Because our students pay a lot of money to get their education. If they're sitting in a classroom and the professor is looking there trying to figure out what to do, it's not a good situation. We all agreed as a school that is the one emergency for the IT staff. We also agreed, and we'll talk about this in a minute, that the second emergency, the second level thing was when a student cannot access their course material. Distance education. Second, listen first. What you've done is a lot of you've done a lot of background work. You know what metrics. You've thought about your services, how to report on them. But this isn't the time to show them to the people that you're talking to influence them. What you want to do is listen to what they're interested in, find out what they need, and write all that down. That's the critical conversation. And then's the fun part. At least for me, I like numbers. It's metrics. You know what you need to, you know what you want to show. You know what your users want you to show. Where are you going to get it? Well, what tools do you have? We use ServiceNow as our IT ticketing tool. What do you guys use? Case? ServiceNow. Anybody use Remedy? Okay. Same for us, yeah. Okay, so that's a big one. What about network monitoring tools? BigFix, Tivoli? We use those. Enterprise applications. A lot of times enterprise applications have some metrics in them. They may be hard to get to, and you may have a central office who doesn't want you to get to them, but they are there and they are available. Sakai, Blackboard. Any of you use any other learning management system? Canvas. We've thought about that. We'll talk after that. I'd like to know how you like that. But they contain things too. So what do you get from them? Take a look at this. This is our ServiceNow report page. I could get a report on anything out of ServiceNow. And we have a whole team devoted to reports in ServiceNow at our central office. I could get any report I need. The question is, which ones are valuable? Some of these things don't really matter to me. They matter to other people, but they don't matter to me and they don't matter to my users. So I need to make sure I know the difference. Do any of you use MediaSite for lecture capture? Beautiful reporting. I love it. We're going to look at this metric in detail later, but this is another example of a reporting tool in an enterprise application that works very well for us. One of the things I had to do after talking to my professor, who waited 2 weeks to get his printer fixed, is where do we stand? You want to make sure you have a baseline when you start any kind of metrics program. That way you know where you are, and that tells you how you can improve. I won't say that this is our second time of doing this survey. I don't want to put up the first one we got because it wouldn't be near like that. We had 4 questions that were objective and then 1 for comments. And the comments were just for me to find out what people are thinking. Notice we said that they were confidential, but I used those comments to make a lot of decisions about how to structure and work the team. But this is what we do yearly. I still do it. We still have the same questions. And this is how we gauge how well we're doing. So what I want to talk about now is what does a good metric look like? And when I say that, I'm thinking about a set of metrics or a set of values that create this picture that you want to show. These are 2 quotes that I really like. I'll give you a second just to read them. Because they really say a lot. You want to make sure you measure the right things. If I still used my original page that I took a long time to build, I'll be measuring the wrong things. I wouldn't be showing my business what they needed to see, and I wouldn't be getting the information that the business needed me to get. So what does a good metric look like? First, it's objective with a consistent data source. As I said earlier, if I see a student in the lobby and they say, I couldn't get my lecture Thursday, that's actually objective. They couldn't get the lecture, but it's not a consistent data source. It's an anecdotal point that I can use, and it's important that I know, but I can't use it for a metric. What I need is a statistic that I can get every time I want to report on it, and it's always there. Can report it over a period of time and regular frequency. I want to be able to get these when I need to make my metrics. I don't want to have to call the SAP office and say, can I get the metrics for the last 3 months, because they can or won't get, they can get those, but I don't think they'll do it every time I ask. I would need access to that data first. You need values. What are you doing now? What were you doing? What's the baseline? What's the average? And threshold values. When do you take action? When do you leave things alone? When do you give somebody a pat on the back? When do you worry about HR issues? I get in trouble on this one sometimes. I believe that you should have a single person who is responsible for making sure that metric is met. That means a manager is responsible for their team meeting the metrics. An individual contributor is responsible for their own metrics. I'd like to see, does anybody disagree with that? I've had several people that didn't agree with that.
The only argument I'd say is a single person is single point of failure. So don't just have one person tracking the metric, have somebody able to fill it in.
Oh, absolutely, I see what you're saying. Well, I'm assuming that we have automated metrics, and I can put this on this person's desk and say, you're responsible for making sure these metrics are met. We go a step further than that. Well, maybe it's not a step further, but what we do is take the annual performance appraisal, now that we have metrics, we put the targets in there, and we make sure that that's in their performance evaluation. You're responsible for getting 75% of this, meets expectations as this, exceeds expectations as this. We make sure that they understand what it is, what the expectation is. What does a metric do? It drives action. Pat on the back, a talk in the office, changing your support plans. Guys' decisions. I'll give you an interesting, I was looking at the metrics from our media site, and I realized that 35 to 40% of our students are looking at their distance education material after our hours. That's a problem, because if they have an issue, who do they call? We're open 8 to 5. So I started 24-hour support for students who can't access course material. We regularly get 2 or 3 calls every weekend, and at least 1 or 2 in the evenings, particularly when there are exams. They like this. Our faculty like it too. In fact, they said, well, I record lectures 24 hours a day. You should offer us that support. Well, look at the metrics. And actually, the metrics say that our faculty record their lectures between 10 and 4 in the afternoon. We had probably 2% of our faculty who ever used it after hours. So I was able to put that data on the table and say, here's the data. What am I missing? And we were able to say, that's not a service we're going to provide for faculty. The reason that's important is because if we provided it for faculty after hours, then we would probably have to have more staff those hours. So good metrics guide and create good decisions. The metrics have to measure progress toward a goal. You saw the snapshot I put up earlier. It didn't have a goal on it. What does it matter that 30% abandon rate? What does that matter? What does that mean to someone when they look at it? They have to know what it means. They have to know what the targets are and where it goes. And you want to do this positive. You want to show success. How many times did it work right instead of it failed 5 times? Showing the success is a little more positive. And it does not introduce bad behavior. Let me give you an example, and I'd like to hear your examples too. We put in, Remedy had a thing where you can automatically send a survey when a ticket is closed. So we signed up for it. One of our analysts figured out that if there's not an email address in the email field, the survey didn't go out. I wondered why they weren't getting surveys. And it turns out, of course, survey results had been added to their performance evaluation. They knew the tickets they hadn't done well. They knew who our problem children were. So anytime they had one of those instances, they just removed the email from the email field. The ticket was still attributed to the individual who put the ticket in, but he didn't get a survey on it. So that introduced bad behavior. You guys have any other instances that have introduced bad behavior from metrics? Yeah. And that, yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had that one too. Another one, we could go on for days. Let me, just one more. Oh, go ahead.
We're trying to reduce escalations to our higher tiers of faculty support, but I argue that sometimes an instructional designer or technologist is more like a personal trainer at that level, and you want them to have more face-time time.
Exactly. We had we had a team leaders who they were responsible for making sure the backlog was met in there, so they wouldn't assign tickets to their members until they were finished with it. So if the ticket was 2 weeks old, it wouldn't be in their queue until they finished it and they put somebody's name on it. So this bad behavior, and again, I'm sure we have other examples. They have to be watching for that when you put metrics together. Again, I showed you ServiceNow. There are all kinds of statistics out there available that you can get automated, that you can get from any kind of thing. You can get uptime, units, number of hops, pass speed, any of these things, number of bugs. You can measure a lot of things, but what's really important depends on which stakeholder. Whatever stakeholder you're talking to is what makes the metric important. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on reporting platform. I'm sure you've seen ads for dashboards, you know, with the dials and the numbers and everything, stop signs. I argue that's not really important. In fact, I would say that's the least important part of a metrics package. Presentation is important. You want people to be able to understand the metrics that you're presenting. But presentation sometimes gets in the way. All of ours, I've tried some of the dashboard packages, we've tried reporting packages, but it all boils down to, and this may be different for you guys, but for us, Excel and Word. All of our metrics are in Excel and Word because that's what we like to use and that's what works for us. That may be different from you, but does anyone use any of the dashboard packages? And do they work for you? Okay. If you forget everything I say today, I said this earlier, your metrics want to tell a story. Remember that. Again, what I wanted to do and what I was able to do, put a piece of paper on the table when I talk to my boss, and it tells the story of what's happening in the group. And some of this, I'll show you several that are successful. One, I think if I put it on the dean's desk, who doesn't know anything about IT, in 5 minutes she would know exactly what's going on with the team. She would know exactly what's going on with IT. That's the metrics you need. Those are the metrics. It's a shared experience. If I give my boss a set of metrics on a piece of paper and it's not what he's seeing, then there's a disconnect. I gave our faculty that really beautiful set of metrics. They didn't care. It didn't match what they had. That wasn't a shared experience. A shared experience is me putting a thing on the table that said, the guys are watching movies. That's why it's taken 2 weeks for your ticket to be done. And this is what we're doing about it. That's what they wanted to see. It's a call to action. That metric means something. It means I'm not going to do anything. It's doing fine. It means give somebody a pat on the back. It means take action, change the way you're doing things. It also shows improvement. You have to show improvement. You have to show how you're making improvement. It has to show where you're going and where you've been. All that creates a compelling story. The story is what you want. Remember this chart? This is the one I get from MediaSite, which is our recording platform. I'm going to break this down for you to show you why I think this is an incredible chart. Look up the top. It was recorded 4/1, 9 a.m. It's 1 hour and 21 minutes. We know how long the lecture is. Performance, that won't matter in this case. Peak connections, that means 2 people watched it at the same time. That's not really interesting. What's interesting is it's been watched 42 times. This is a small class. So this has been watched 42 times. It was watched all month. I happen to know that 4/21 was a test. So you can see a spike of 4/21. 19 hours. This thing has been watched for 19 hours. But the average watch time was 28 minutes out of a 1 hour and 21 minute lecture. So you give this to a faculty member. What can you gain? What information can you gain from that? And what kind of decisions or guidance can you get from that? Number one, I'll just throw this one out. Is anybody watching the lecture? Do I really need to put these things out there? 28 minutes were watched. Take a look at this lower. How many of you are familiar with YouTube and you're familiar with the hotspots? Well, that's what we have down at the bottom. This is a graphic depiction of the video. The red spots are where people are having problems. That's where they keep repeating and going over and watching something over and over. So if I'm that faculty, I'm going to go to 50 minutes in the video. I'm going to see what's there because, number one, it's either very complex, and because it's a school of nursing, I imagine some things are very complex. Or two, it's not explained well. I need to change the video, at least at that point, and explain this better. We have other hot spots over here that could be good for support, but you get the picture of where we're going. What's really good is the second page. I love these numbers. This is such a good report. This shows everyone who has watched this video. I want you to look at CRN 9 there next to the last. They've watched 28 seconds of this video. What do you think that professor is going to do when the CRN calls and says, yeah, I'm having a problem with this lesson. That's why I did poorly on the test. She can look this up and say, well, you watched 28 seconds of the video. Why don't you look at the video and understand the material? You can also look at the top one. They've watched it 8 times. They've watched it all the way through. They spent 3 hours on this one lecture. They're having a problem. Maybe the faculty member needs to call them and say, you know, we've got a problem. This is the power of metrics, and this is what we can give our faculty and the staff who support our faculty so they make sure that our students have a good educational experience. One more thing. See the bottom, the top web browsers. This is what really gets me. Whenever a student calls in and is having trouble, we say, use Firefox because that's best for MediaSite. We tell them that at orientation. We tell them at the beginning of the semester. Firefox is 38% of the time. When a student calls us and says, you know, I'm having trouble seeing this lecture, our first step is to go to the metrics and say, well, you know, you're not using Firefox, and we told you to use Firefox. So that covers us, and it lets them know that we understand that they may be having problems, but we know how to fix it too. Again, this is a beautiful metric. So, let's say you want to do this. Where do you begin? Where do you begin telling the story? I like to, I've read a lot about this, and one of the things that worked for us was to define a good day and a bad day. Pick 5 metrics that define a really good day, or that you can say, this was a good day, this was a bad day. What 5 metrics would that be? Let's talk about that for a minute. Say for a service desk. What's a metric that would really tell how well your service desk is doing? A few calls. Of the calls you get.
How many calls? How long to wait for first answer? Could you resolve it on first call?
Okay. Any others? Time to completion. Right. Right. One that we use, one that's very important to us, is how soon. Most of our tickets come in through email. So how soon did and we send the automated response from ServiceNow, but how soon did our user get a call or an email from our service desk analyst that said, what can I do to help you? So pick those metrics that best define the service, but keep it to a few. Define baseline, target, warning, and action values. Baseline, what are you doing now? I'll use my example. I want our users to respond within an hour to our analysts to respond within an hour to our users. So target is an hour. Baseline, it was two hours and whatever when we started. When do I want to be warned? If it starts going above 2 hours, I need to know. Action values, when it's above 3, we have to make some changes. When it's below 0.5, somebody gets a pat on the back. It's easy to define and it's easy to show. Automate the tracking of these values. Automation is key here. How many of you have started something and something gets caught, you know, you've got it going for 4 weeks and then something gets you, you got an emergency and you can't take the time to calculate something. How many does that happen to? Happens to me. If you automate the gathering of this data, then it's there and you don't have to worry about it. We were automating some things that we couldn't get from the data that we had to calculate manually. We ended up removing those from our metrics because it introduced inconsistency. It was more important not to show the inconsistency than to have that in our metrics. At the end of the day, you've got 5 variables. Is it a thumbs up or a thumbs down? And that's easy. It was a good day or a bad day. Track those over time and you have your trend line and you know where you're going and where you're headed. So let's go back to my original masterpiece. What's wrong with this? And who is it for? Who would get something from this? Yeah, I would. But now that I look at it, this was done in 2010. I don't know what it means. I mean, were we on target? Were we not on target? I have no idea. So we don't show any of that background here. These are good metrics. They're valid. And they mean something. They meant something in 2010. And 2010, okay, well, we're going up on, 'on, I don't know, network connectivity issues. Let's take a look at that. Or We have a lot more phone calls. What does that mean? Number of resolved tickets, that's lower than it was last month. What do we do about that? This has a lot in it, but it leaves a lot to be desired. I would say that this is temporarily good for me. It's a snapshot. It might be good for my team, but little else. And I got to say, it looks pretty good. I mean, it's nicely symmetrical. It's got the pie charts, the values up here, the nice bar chart. It's a pretty report, in my opinion. But it doesn't do the job. Here's another one we started for a small team. We used this for about a year. What's wrong with this one? Right. Inconsistent data. So immediately, you don't trust that anymore. When you see it, you wonder, is it here this week or is it there next week? So that's when we talk about the automation. You have to automate these things so that they're always there. Anything else? I'm sorry? Right. And that's interesting that you bring that up, because why is Carla's at 48 low, Jason at 46 is low, Denise at 22 is not low? What does that mean? Imagine several years ago we knew what that meant. But today, I don't know. Anything else? Well, it's not pretty for one thing. But again, I said presentation is second. Really, this data is not, it's not a good show of data. So, what is? This is a beautiful piece of work. This is the one I base all of our metrics on. I wish I could take credit for building it, but I can't. This was done by our central office, and everything that we do, every metric that I do for a group uses this format. Up at the top, we have the measurement, the measures that we use. This defines a good day or a bad day. Notice that we've put an importance weight. This is how important this metric is to the business. The business said that. I didn't say that. The business tells us what's important in those. We have our baseline, where we are. Where do we want to go? Meets expectations means you're doing your job. Exceeds expectation, that's our goal. That means, yeah, you're doing a really good job. Actual, this is what you did for May. And then progress toward completion, or progress towards success. Notice this overall indicator. That tells you if it was a good day or a bad day. Those good days and bad days are tracked on the trend chart below. And in every case, you can tell exactly where the person is. So if I take this, or the team this, when I put it on the dean's desk, I guarantee you she knows how we're doing. If I put this on my boss's desk, he knows how we're doing. Oh. This is an individual report. Same format and the same information. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go up a little bit. The goal is to improve user experience. When we implemented our metrics, this is what we saw, this improvement. We also were able to make these other decisions about other metrics. Let me close by telling you what happened with Drew. As you see, Drew got a lot of equipment, but this is his office, and he was completely swamped. We still had these questions that we needed to answer, and we did it with metrics. This doesn't look anything like the other metrics we did, but it's appropriate for his work and what he does. You see we have tabs at the bottom so that if I put this on the desk, everybody knows what he's doing. By the way, we saw what he was doing. It was good work. It was a lot of work. So he got a video studio. Well, he had to share it. But then we built a new building, and he got a real studio. And just Friday, we posted a new position where he's going to get some help, because this demand has picked up because of the metrics work we did in making this a service. So, very quickly, put the business first, find your metrics. It's important what it looks like, but it's less important than what it says. Always tell a story, and that improves your user experience. I'm sorry, I guess we don't have time to share ideas and things, but thank you for coming. I really appreciate your attendance and your cooperation.